Just hours before Yamamoto's world would be completely turned around, he held a brush in his grip, concentrating intensely on scrubbing the bathroom tiles. His attention then shifted to the drain, which he cleaned with meticulous care. This was our main character, a first-year college student. During his regular cleaning routine, he discovered an odd satisfaction in watching dirt disappear. Perched on a stool, he prepared to add the finishing touches, certain he'd leave the bathroom immaculate. Our protagonist believed cleaning was wonderful, because the harder he worked, the cleaner everything became. Cleaning, in his view, consistently rewarded effort, unlike people who could be unpredictable and unjust. Upon completion, he wiped away his perspiration, and grinning, told himself the sensation was amazing. When he glanced at his phone, however, he was startled by the time. After all, he needed to get to his part-time work. Still, he noted that while night shifts paid more, the shop was located in a residential neighborhood and barely received customers after dark, making things more peaceful. Already at work with his chin resting in his palm, he contemplated how tedious it all was. Seated before the register computer, he reflected that even for a night shift, business was slower than normal, and he even questioned whether the store could survive operating this way. Something on one of the security monitors grabbed his attention. He spotted the silhouette of a customer entering the establishment. Soon, the customer approached the counter and set her items down. He was quickly taken aback when the customer addressed him by name. She mentioned it had been quite some time since they last encountered each other, and he immediately recognized the voice with ease. Our protagonist was stunned, hardly believing who stood before him. It was her, a former classmate from high school. Her name was Hayashi. He couldn't fathom that she was also living in Tokyo. Hayashi then inquired if he lived in the vicinity, and he responded that he resided in a nearby apartment. Returning the question with a subtle smile, she confirmed that in a sense she did as well. Next, she asked which university he was attending, and upon learning it was University K, she praised him, saying it was remarkable and that he had always been intelligent. That exchange had left him utterly bewildered, and he wondered why on earth Hayashi was engaging in casual conversation with him. While scanning her purchases, he observed that something like this would never have occurred in high school. Only 4 months had passed since graduation, and she appeared completely transformed. His mind then transported him back to their high school days, recalling what Hayashi had been like then. In his memory, she appeared in class, yawning without concern for anything surrounding her. Suddenly, an eraser tumbled from her desk. Quickly, he turned his head, looking at the object beside him. Meanwhile, the girl gazed absent-mindedly through the window, her face resting in her palm, completely oblivious to her belongings. At that moment, a dilemma entered his thoughts, and he wondered whether he should retrieve the eraser or simply ignore it. Muttering to himself, he decided it was better to pick it up, imagining that if he didn't, she'd likely complain later. So he bent down and collected the eraser from the floor. However, when he turned around, he was startled because she was staring at him with revulsion. Still, he placed the eraser on her desk, mentioning she had dropped it. Her reaction, however, was pure contempt. Our protagonist was completely puzzled by her response, and wondered what was wrong with that girl. Despite everything, he remembered that in high school she possessed a beautiful face, numerous friends, and was consistently popular with boys constantly confessing to her. He even recalled witnessing one of those confessions being rejected. In his memories, a boy confessed to Hayashi. Yamamoto conversely said he could never comprehend what others found appealing in her. The boy who confessed seemed extremely bashful, anxiously awaiting a response. Her reaction, however, was filled with scorn. She placed her hand on her hip and released a frustrated scream, leaving the boy completely stunned. Due to such behavior, at some point she earned the nickname the Arrogant Queen. Returning to the present, he concluded he had no pleasant memories of her, and that it was best to avoid involvement. So, adhering strictly to his job, he asked if she needed a bag. However, glancing away momentarily, something caught his eye. Her wrist revealed bruises. Shocked by what he observed, he gestured toward her arm. Caught off guard, Hayashi quickly grasped it, attempting to conceal the marks. Concerned, he asked what had happened to her arm. She in turn just looked away, remaining silent and visibly uncomfortable. Nervously, she gripped her shirt sleeve tightly. In his thoughts, he found it strange that she was wearing long sleeves in the middle of summer. He concluded that it wasn't normal, and that she was probably hiding something even worse beneath. His worry increased, and he was certain that whatever was concealed under that blouse had to be more serious. Then, with a melancholic smile, she admitted that she had been struck, and that the one responsible was her boyfriend. The revelation left him completely paralyzed. Attempting to learn more, he inquired about her boyfriend. Soon she explained that he was at home and that they cohabitated. However, Hayashi didn't seem concerned and, acting like her former self, turned her face away, annoyed by his questions. Then she scolded him, saying he always spoke too much. Without uttering another word, she turned and walked toward the exit, leaving him behind. With that, he concluded with a sigh that she always despised him, and he tried not to care about the situation. However, her words resonated in his mind. He remembered how she had confessed her boyfriend struck her and wondered why, of all people, she had revealed that to him. Then it occurred to him. He asked himself if the feared queen had shown him a vulnerable side, but he soon panicked upon realizing she was returning home, fearing her boyfriend might harm her again. Driven by impulse, he called out to her with a hesitant voice. Then he leaned over the counter and shouted for her to stop. Determined, he made an unexpected offer, telling her to stay at his place that night. Her reaction, however, was filled with anger, and upon noticing his expression, she misunderstood everything, thinking he had ulterior motives, when in fact, he only wanted to help. With his hands raised in surrender, he tried to explain, assuring her he wouldn't do anything and that if she didn't trust him, he'd give her his spare key and spend the night at an internet cafe. Our protagonist simply insisted that she not return home that night, or better yet, that she seek out her parents and return to their house. But the girl revealed that her parents had disowned her, which left him completely shocked. She then explained that when she told them she'd be living with her boyfriend, her parents became furious and threatened to cut her off. Because of that, she ended up dropping out of college. With that, a heavy silence fell over the place, as the two remained standing before the counter. Still releasing a sigh, he insisted that she shouldn't return home that night. He then said he'd get the spare key and would also send her the address by text. However, to his surprise, she declined, saying she didn't need the key, which left him confused. Hayashi then said she would wait, and with her head down, she finally clarified that she would wait until his shift concluded. As she spoke, her hands nervously twisted a lock of her hair, revealing her anxiety. Then he said his shift would end in about an hour and suggested she read a magazine or something to pass the time. While waiting, he remembered how Hayashi had been in high school, the queen, who was always surrounded by people and seemed beloved by everyone. However, he thought that image didn't match the girl standing there now. The sight of the bruises on her arm returned to his mind. It left him completely speechless. Shortly after they arrived at the building where he lived. Upon entering, he boasted about how tidy the place was, but she, with her usual bluntness, commented that it looked more like it was empty. He then asked her to sit and said he would get her some barley tea. As the ice cracked in the glass, he thought that even at that moment, Hayashi's presence in his room felt completely surreal. Soon, he concluded that even though everything had happened naturally, the situation still made him extremely nervous, even if he had no intention of doing anything with her. She then picked up the glass and drank the barley tea in a quick gulp. Breaking the silence, and Hayashi remarked with a slight smile that she couldn't believe she now owed him a favor. He, on the other hand, said he didn't see it that way since he had just done what anyone would have done. She then started to open up and said they both needed time to cool off. Trying to understand better, he then asked if her boyfriend was just in a bad mood. With a somber expression, she confirmed, explaining that he didn't usually strike her and that it only happened when things went poorly at work, so she said she should support him better. Surprised, our protagonist commented that this wasn't something the Hayashi from school would have said. Annoyed, she told him to shut up, saying, "People change." Her words made him thoughtful, and he reflected on her idea of hoping it was just a bad day. With that, he said that if her story was really true, maybe he shouldn't have told her not to go home. However, ignoring his thoughts, he said she could spend the night there. Surprised, she thanked him. Still teasing him, she remarked that he too was saying things he never would have in high school. She then asked if she could use his shower, and he agreed. Next, she wanted to know if he had anything she could wear, but he replied that he only had men's clothes. While she went to the bathroom, he remained seated at the table waiting in silence. Suddenly, the sound of the shower began to echo through the apartment. The running water made him imagine Hayashi in the shower. A drop of sweat ran down his face, and he couldn't hide how nervous he felt. The image of the queen from school invaded his mind, and he could hardly believe Hayashi was showering in his house. Yamamoto then looked at his watch and thought that maybe he should change as well. His thoughts, however, were interrupted when Hayashi stepped out of the bathroom, saying the shower had been really refreshing. He turned and, visibly flustered, could only stammer. Smiling as she dried her hair with a towel, she commented that his bathroom was excessively clean. However, when he glanced downward, His eyes widened in pure shock at what he saw, because her legs, now exposed, were covered in multiple bruises. He then remarked regretfully that it looked really severe. Hayashi, in turn, just said her boyfriend was a lost cause. Worried, he pointed out that the bruises looked old. Her response, however, was cold and defensive. With a distant look, she just asked what that mattered. Her reaction was a clear warning sign, and he, holding his glass, understood that look meant not to press the subject. Even so, he decided he needed to say something, and remarked that she shouldn't be with someone like that. She then fired back, asking what he could possibly know about her situation. He backed off a bit, saying he didn't know anything and that it was just his opinion, and the decision to listen or not was entirely hers. Still, with his eyes closed, he explained that if something happened to her, people would ask why he didn't stop her and the blame would fall on him. And while she clenched her teeth, he stated he was saying it for her own good. With a serious expression, he asked if she really still wanted to support someone who struck her when stressed. With that, he wondered when she had become that way. Our protagonist remembered how he used to despise her, but now saw that few people could live so selflessly, concluding that she was just being used, imagining it would all be for nothing. He was suddenly overcome with anger. Despite everything, he said that if she still wanted to go back, he wouldn't stop her. Hearing his words, Hayashi just looked away. Immediately, he regretted what he had said. He thought it was a reflex and wondered if he had gone too far. Surely she would definitely get upset. Even so, he resigned himself to the situation, thinking that if she didn't take his words seriously, there was nothing else he could do. Then, with a sad smile hugging her knees, Hayashi agreed that it would all be awful. Changing the subject, he said he was getting sleepy and offered his bed for her to sleep in, saying he'd sleep on the floor. She, in turn, thanked him as she got under the covers. As he moved away, he watched her. Our protagonist advised her not to rush, saying she should take some time to think about everything. She then teased him, saying he sounded like an enlightened monk, and that it was no wonder he never got a girlfriend. He in turn wondered if that was why he was still single. Without saying another word, he pulled the curtain, leaving the room in complete darkness. A short while later, he threw himself on the floor, and even in the cold began to fall asleep. The night went on, and the two remained in their separate spaces. However, Yamamoto soon muttered that there was no way he could fall asleep. Suddenly, Hayashi turned and looked at him. Her expression was unreadable. She then called out to him, breaking the silence of the room. Next, she turned toward him and in a soft voice made a shocking suggestion, asking if he wanted to do it. Hearing that, Yamamoto's eyes widened. He panicked, stammering and asking what she meant by it. Desperate, he explained that he had only let her stay on impulse and that he hadn't intended anything else. Sweating cold, he wondered if she was just messing with him. Suddenly, his body was wrapped in an unexpected embrace, and he let out a scream. Then Hayashi started laughing, and surprised, he asked what she was doing. With a subtle movement, she slid her leg over his, getting even closer. Completely confused, he asked if she had embraced him just to see if he was awake. Totally embarrassed, he asked who had given her permission to embrace him. But whispering in his ear, she said it was just an embrace. He considered for a moment mentioning her boyfriend, but quickly realized it wasn't the right time and swallowed the thought. Breaking the silence, Hayashi looked him straight in the eyes and asked if he was a virgin. The question caught him off guard and embarrassed. He looked away, unsure how to answer. Trying to keep his composure, he denied it, but she immediately called him a liar. Still, she said his reaction was in a way endearing. Completely embarrassed, he told her to shut up. In an impulse, he grabbed her wrist. His expression, however, turned serious. Hayashi then started to open up, saying her boyfriend wasn't always like that, and that he used to be kind and attentive, doing everything she wanted. She went on explaining that everything changed once they started cohabiting. The poor girl confessed that he began striking her whenever his mood shifted, even when it wasn't because of work. She tried to justify it, saying his feelings were just confused. A painful memory then came to mind where he humiliated her for not earning money. But when she offered to work, he belittled her, questioning what someone with only a high school diploma could even do. After the confession, a heavy silence fell over the room. Then Hayashi remarked that it wasn't a very entertaining story, and with a melancholic smile told him to go to sleep. Ignoring her suggestion, Yamamoto simply said her with empathy that she had been through a lot. His words caught her completely off guard, and her eyes widened in shock. Confused, she asked what he had said, but Yamamoto, embarrassed, asked her to forget it. However, she insisted, asking him to repeat it, but he just sighed and told her to go to sleep. With a faint smile, she called him a lost cause, and he, still flustered, retorted, asking who she thought she was. His face turned bright red, and he couldn't hide how embarrassed he was. A genuine smile then formed on the girl's lips. Getting closer to him, she whispered that it had been a long time since she had heard something like that. And so, unexpectedly, the two began cohabiting. The next morning, our protagonist groaned as he slowly awakened. As he sat up, he wondered why he was sleeping on the floor. Suddenly he was surprised, and his gaze was immediately drawn to the girl lying next to him. He saw Hayashi sleeping peacefully, and the memories of the previous night came rushing back. With a sigh, he remembered why he was in that situation. Watching her tranquil face, he couldn't help but think how drastically she had changed since their high school days. A little later, the sound of vegetables sizzling in the pan broke the morning silence. The noise in the kitchen woke Hayashi, who grumbled and stretched slowly. Still groggy, she watched him in the kitchen, and little by little, the memories of the previous night came back to her. Tired, she wished him good morning and complained that her whole body was sore from sleeping on the floor. He, in turn, said he had insisted that she use the bed and that there was no need for such sacrifice on her part. Curious about the smell, she came closer and asked if he was making yakisoba, and he confirmed. Surprised, she asked if he knew how to cook. He modestly replied that he knew a little, and asked her to wait as the food was almost ready. Still a bit skeptical, she asked again if he was sure. Shortly after, 2 steaming plates of yakisoba were served on the table. The noodles looked delicious. Without hesitation, Hayashi grabbed a generous portion and started eating enthusiastically. With her cheeks full, she chewed eagerly and with shining eyes said it was amazing. Distracted with his phone, he thanked her for the compliment, but soon after teased her, saying she had terrible manners. He then apologized, explaining that the habit of using his phone during meals came from living alone for so long. After finishing her meal with hands clasped in a gesture of gratitude, she thanked him for the food, saying it was really good. He, however, tried to downplay the compliment, saying he had just followed the instructions on the package. Annoyed, she scolded him, telling him not to ruin the compliment she had just given, and he, embarrassed, apologized. Next, she offered to wash the dishes, but he stopped her, saying she was a guest. Hayashi insisted, saying it was her way of paying for the food and shelter, but he, irritated, told her to shut up, saying it was unnecessary. Changing the subject, the girl asked if he had a hair tie, but he said no, though he mentioned having rubber bands if she wanted. She complained, asking if he knew what happened when you tied your hair with a rubber band, explaining that it hurt and pulled out strands. He defended himself, saying he had no way of knowing, and offered plastic ties instead, and with that, she ended up accepting. Holding the elastic with her mouth, she began tying her hair into a ponytail. Meanwhile, Yamamoto watched her in silence. After that, she went to the kitchen and started washing the dishes. Lying down, he looked at his phone, but his thoughts were on her, and he wished she could at least relax while she was there. Shortly after, the two sat at the table, and he said it was time to talk about the next steps. With a serious expression, he stated that in the end, everything would depend on what she wanted to do. Head down, she agreed, but confessed she was afraid of regretting making the wrong choice. He then advised her to try to look at the situation objectively to decide what she wanted so there wouldn't be regrets. However, she asked how he could be so sure of that. She explained that it wasn't always possible to see things objectively and that sometimes people were just overwhelmed by emotion. With teary eyes, she concluded it was impossible to say someone would never regret a decision. Our protagonist disagreed, saying it wasn't impossible, but she insisted it was. He then reassured her, promising she would be okay. But skeptically, she asked how he could know that. And, well, his answer left her flustered as he simply said it was easy. And with a thumbs up, he declared that's exactly why he was there. With that, an awkward silence settled between them. Realizing he might have overdone it, a bead of sweat began to roll down his face. He then composed himself and explained that if she was afraid to decide alone, she should talk to someone and offered to listen. Teasing him, she said that didn't suit him at all, and he almost seemed like someone trustworthy. However, he immediately said he was just being selfish and trying to impose his own opinions. Then she covered her mouth with her hand and commented that he was always so indirect. He then proposed that they think things through together and asked her to first tell him about her relationship, even if it was hard. And so, Hayashi began telling everything that had happened since she moved to Tokyo. Though she tried to make a few jokes to ease the tension, her story was far from amusing. By the end of the story, a forced smile appeared on her face, and he couldn't understand why that reaction after telling such tragedy. She then explained that her boyfriend wasn't always angry and that he also apologized. With that, our protagonist explained that domestic violence followed a cycle. He then explained that it all started with constant irritation. And then came the violent outburst and finally the regret. Always too late to fix anything. Surprised, she asked how he knew so much about that, and he revealed he had done some research while she was washing the dishes. He then asked if she had ever talked to anyone else about it, but she confessed he was the first, remembering how she seemed to have so many friends in school. He asked where her phone was. With a downcast look, she said she didn't have one, explaining that her boyfriend always insisted it wasn't necessary since she just needed to have him around. The revelation made him uneasy, and he asked if her boyfriend had broken it. She then confessed that because of that, she had lost all her contacts, and since he wouldn't let her have a new phone, she felt completely trapped. Hearing that rage took over Yamamoto and his fists clenched tightly on the table, he reflected that initially his intention was only to intervene to ease his own conscience in case something happened to her, but in that moment, his perspective had completely changed. With unshakable determination, he decided that no matter the cost, even if she ended up hating him for it, Hayashi needed to break up with that guy. Downplaying the seriousness of the situation, she tried to justify the boyfriend's behavior, saying that although he struck her sometimes, he also had a sweet side and could be really endearing. Hearing that, our protagonist wondered how he could convince her. However, to his complete surprise, Hayashi announced she was thinking of breaking up with him, and explained that talking to him had helped her see everything in a new light. Her sudden decision completely caught him off guard. She then agreed with him, concluding that her boyfriend was just using her to feed his own sense of ownership. And, well, with her decision made, he said that if she was short, the next step would be to hear his suggestion. He quickly explained that from what he'd read about how abusers clung to their victims, he didn't think her boyfriend would accept the breakup quietly. His warning terrified her, and she shrank at the thought that he might retaliate. He then said he had a proposal, and the goal was to make the ex-boyfriend not want anything to do with her anymore. Worried, she asked if he was planning to hurt her ex or something like that, saying it would be too much. But he said first there were places they needed to go, starting with the hospital and then to the police station. In disbelief, she asked if his proposal really involved the police. He then explained that they would file a report and detailed his reasoning, stating that if the ex-boyfriend was under police watch and had a record, he wouldn't be able to get close to her. However, Hayashi hesitated, asking him to wait and questioning if they really needed to go that far. He in turn began listing reasons, reminding her that her ex had left bruises all over her body and made her cut ties with everyone, including her parents, who had disowned her because of him. Our protagonist emphasized that the ex had destroyed her phone, leaving her completely isolated with the clear intent to imprison her. With that, he confronted her directly, asking if even after all that, she still didn't want to involve the police. A heavy silence settled in the room, and Hayashi remained with her head down. Yamamoto watched her, patiently waiting for an answer. However, the bruises on her legs seemed even heavier in that moment, and he confronted her, asking if she hadn't said she was ready to leave him. She argued that breaking up and pressing charges were two very different things. And, well, to her surprise, he simply agreed, saying he understood, and that they wouldn't go to the police, which left her stunned. Our protagonist then explained that he was just someone she was talking to, and even if he thought it was the right move, it was natural that she felt differently. Hayashi agreed, and asked that likewise if something bothered him, he should just say it just as she had. He then said that in that case, he asked that she take what he'd said a little less seriously. With that, the girl also said he could speak up if there was ever something about her that bothered him. With that, he said doing things that way was more efficient. She then said he could have phrased that a bit more gently, but he, with his completely robotic way, asked what that would even sound like. Anyway, he clarified that they wouldn't go to the police for now, since it wouldn't make sense if it only caused her more pain. At which she replied that he should have said that from the start. He then continued, suggesting she stay at his place for a while. Immediately she pulled away, misinterpreting his intentions and asking if that's what he had wanted all along, leaving him confused about what she meant. Annoyed, she called him pathetic, and he in turn shouted, asking what she thought he was trying to do. He then explained his logic, reminding her that since she lived with her ex, she couldn't just go back there, which made her realize her mistake. Next, he mentioned that her ex was probably already looking for her like a maniac at that very moment. He said that was exactly why he had made that suggestion, and recommended she not leave the apartment for a while, to which she reluctantly agreed. He then said there was one more thing, something she would need to do even if she didn't like it, and she curiously asked what it was. Suddenly her eyes widened. In his mind, Yamamoto hoped she would understand the situation, because if she did, everything would go much faster. Completely tense, Hayashi nervously gestured as she covered her chest with her hands. But then she made it clear she wouldn't mind. After all, in the end, he was just trying to help, and that was enough for her to accept it. Hearing that, Yamamoto immediately realized she was misunderstanding everything. He realized that once again, she had gotten the whole situation wrong. Then she began to state her conclusion, saying that she already knew what he wanted and accused him of wanting full access to her body. He in turn told her to stop talking nonsense, but she, irritated, asked what was so stupid about what she said. He then confronted her, reminding her how she had been all over him before they slept, and with that asked if she was fine with one night, but couldn't deal with it every day. A little embarrassed, he then wondered if maybe she just hated being treated like an object and concluded head down that his theory was probably right. He then advised her not to agree to something she didn't want to do, which left her confused. And pointing at her, Yamamoto finally clarified what he meant. He gestured toward her arm resting on the table covered in bruises. He then stated that she needed to go to the hospital. Then it finally clicked, and she understood the true meaning of his words. With her hands together, she finally agreed. Even so, he couldn't help but wonder why her voice sounded a bit disappointed. As they headed to the hospital, he concluded he would probably never understand how the Queen's mind worked. The medical report made it clear how serious the situation was, pointing to bruises scattered across her body and a torn ligament in her wrist that required immediate attention. After leaving the hospital, the two walked silently along the sidewalk. The atmosphere between them was heavy. Yamamoto recalled how, at the hospital, Hayashi tried to dodge the doctor's questions about the origin of her injuries. He realized she was trying to avoid the subject and leave as quickly as possible, concluding she still felt intimidated because of her ex-boyfriend. With that, he wondered if it was right to just let things go like that, but he decided it wasn't. After all, she clearly had no intention of pressing charges. Changing the subject, he commented that her clothes looked too warm for the weather. A bit awkwardly, she agreed. Determined to help her in another way, he said they were going shopping since she would need some things. In his thoughts, he concluded the best thing he could do was focus on helping her so he'd be ready in case she changed her mind. Worried, she brought up the money issue, but he reassured her, saying he had a bit saved, though he warned he wouldn't be able to buy her everything. Then she immediately promised she'd pay him back for anything she needed, even if she didn't know when that would be. However, with a gentle smile, he said it was no problem at all. Shortly after, they were already in a store, and Hayashi was looking at a dress. Then she appeared in the lingerie section, cheerfully holding a few bras, which left Yamamoto completely flustered. The next morning, while birds chirped outside, Hayashi continued to sleep soundly. Yamamoto, on the other hand, woke up on the floor, groaning from the back pain of sleeping on the floor again. With that, he said he really needed to buy a futon. He got up and, looking at the closet, thought he still had time before his classes and could use it to do a quick morning cleaning. However, his expression changed when he looked at his new roommate, and he quickly reconsidered his plan. He decided it was better to skip the cleaning and instead head to the kitchen to prepare him breakfast. Meanwhile, still in bed, Hayashi turned over, completely oblivious to the world. Soon the sound of sausages frying in the pan echoed through the apartment. He then prepared a full meal and left it on the table with a note indicating it was for her. Watching her sleep peacefully, he said she should sleep as much as she wanted to recover. While walking to college, Yamamoto thought that for someone whose hobby was cleaning, skipping the morning routine felt completely wrong. Later, on the way back, he carried shopping bags, including a futon, and declared that with it he'd finally get a good night's sleep. Suddenly, as he approached home, a familiar smell caught his attention. He realized the scent was coming from his apartment and wondered if it was food. Opening the door, he announced that he was home. To his surprise, he found Hayashi in the kitchen wearing an apron and preparing dinner. She greeted him warmly. Watching her, he thought to himself how glad he was that he bought her that hair tie. The girl then asked if he liked hamburger steak. Surprised by the gesture, he said she didn't need to wait for him to cook, and that he could have made dinner when he got home. But Hayashi replied that since she was staying there, cooking was the least she could do. Next, with a quick and skillful motion, she flipped the hamburger steak in the pan. Impressed, Yamamoto said she was really good at it, and she explained she'd had enough practice. Shortly after, she placed the plate in front of him and asked what he thought. Impatient, she pressed, asking directly if he liked hamburger steak or not. And, well, he replied that he didn't hate it. With that, she said that was a pretty evasive answer. As he stepped away, she called him, and he in turn asked what she wanted. While putting away his groceries, the girl said she wanted to talk about something after dinner. A moment later, our protagonist seemed to sense something was off. Looking at the plate in front of him, a doubt crossed his mind. He wondered if he had even bought ground beef. Hayashi, however, seemed unaware of his thoughts. And as she tied her hair back, she let out a sigh of relief for finishing the task. Ignoring his doubts, he joined her at the table, and Hayashi, smiling, said they should start eating. With chopsticks in hand, he cut a piece of the steak. As he chewed the first bite, Hayashi watched him anxiously, eager to know what he thought. After a moment of suspense, he finally gave his verdict, saying it was good. The compliment visibly made her happy. Soon after, the plates were empty, and dinner came to an end. She immediately got up and began clearing the dishes, saying she would wash them. He tried to stop her, but she insisted she didn't need help, explaining she wanted to move around a bit and would take care of the chores. And so, she went to the kitchen. Then he asked if she had gone out that day. However, she just kept washing the dishes in silence as the water ran in the sink. He immediately regretted his tone, realizing it sounded like a possessive boyfriend. He tried to correct himself, saying that wasn't what he meant, but Hayashi turned to him with a challenging look and asked if he had a problem with that. Tension filled the air. He then said he had no problem at all, but that whether or not she followed his advice was entirely up to her. Our protagonist explained that going out and risking running into her ex again was a very reckless move. And well, upon hearing that, she made it clear he would never understand, and he admitted he truly didn't get what she was going through even if he tried. Angry, she turned and yelled that if he didn't understand, then he shouldn't interfere. Her outburst left a heavy silence in the air, and Yamamoto just sat there, his back to her. Soon Hayashi composed herself, and without saying anything else, she finished washing the dishes and set them out to dry. Then she approached him and sat beside him, breaking the tension that had built up. Regretful, she apologized, admitting she was being stubborn. He, however, disagreed, saying he was the one who had made a mistake. Yamamoto explained that he should have asked her earlier in the morning instead of assuming he'd take care of the shopping alone. Gently, she said he didn't need to apologize for that.